My future mother-in-law was crying her eyes out, complaining that she had nowhere to live, but she had just sold her old farmhouse on her own accord to move into my newlywed penthouse. Upon hearing the news, I broke off the engagement the very next day, leaving her pale as a sheet. I had invested almost $300,000, the fruit of my entire youth, the savings of blood, sweat, and tears to buy the condo of my dreams. Which was also the day my mother-in-law announced she was moving in to take the reins. And the brand new, shiny property deed in my hand cruelly displayed the names of my fiancé and his mother. They had turned me from a homeowner into a homeless person right on the doorstep of my wedding. I stood motionless in the middle of the spacious living room, letting the scorching rays of the May 2025 Chicago sun filter through the floor-to-ceiling windows and dance across the brilliant hardwood floors. The smell of fresh Benjamin Moore paint mixed with the rich scent of the custom oak cabinetry, creating a signature fragrance. The smell of a new home. The smell of the achievement I had longed for during the 10 long years I had been fighting in this city. My trembling hands gently touched the surface of the custom dining table, feeling the cool, polished smoothness beneath my fingertips. This wasn't just a condo. It was my sweat, my tears, my youth. This luxury penthouse with panoramic views of the downtown skyline was valued at $500,000, a figure that when I finished college, I wouldn't have even dared to dream of. I remembered 6 years ago when I was just a junior CPA. In the mornings, a $10 deli sandwich. At night, instant ramen in my tiny cramped rental in Albany Park. In the rainy Midwestern springs, the ceiling leaked. In the humid summers, it was an unbearable oven. Back then, I swore to myself that I would get a decent place to call home. A place that my parents in their rural Indiana town could proudly brag about to their neighbors whenever they came to visit their daughter. To reach this day, I had sacrificed a lot. $200,000 was the amount I saved, penny by penny. Denying myself luxuries, taking on extra freelance tax work at night until my head spun. But that amount wasn't enough. I remember like it was yesterday, the day I went back to my hometown to ask my parents for advice on buying the place. My dad, a man who had spent his life working the land with calloused and cracked hands, walked quietly into his bedroom. From the bottom of an old cedar chest, he pulled out a thick envelope wrapped carefully in plastic. He tremblingly opened it and handed me a Chase Bank savings passbook with a balance of $50,000. My dad looked at me with eyes clouded by age but full of love. He told me to take it to help with the down payment. He said it was his and Mom's retirement money, but that they were still strong, that with some homemade stew and bread, they could keep going. You have it harder in the city, sweetheart. You need a home to settle down. My mom, sitting next to him with red eyes, placed a few vintage gold jewelry pieces she had kept since her youth into my hand. Holding that money, it felt like it weighed a ton. It wasn't money. It was the flesh and blood, the lifetime of sacrifice my parents were making for me. I promised myself that this home would be the place where I would care for my parents in their old age, to make up for all their silent sacrifices. For the remaining $250,000, I decided to take out a mortgage. With my current salary as a senior accounting director and my side income, I was sure I could handle it. The loan would be in both of our names to make the paperwork easier, but I would be paying the vast majority of the monthly mortgage. Liam, my boyfriend and fiancé, had agreed to help me pay off the debt. Liam worked in sales with a much more irregular income than mine, but he was a good, hard-working guy. We had been together for 3 years. Our families already knew each other, and we were just waiting to pick a good date for the wedding. This condo was the future nest we were building together. I stepped out onto the balcony. The wind sweeping off Lake Michigan blew fiercely, cutting through the sweltering heat. In the distance, the skyscrapers gleamed under the sun. The traffic on Lakeshore Drive flowed endlessly. I took a deep breath, feeling my chest swell with happiness. From now on, I was officially a Chicago homeowner, no longer having to endure a nomadic life, the constant fear of a landlord raising the rent or suddenly selling the building. I imagined the scene in the future. Every evening, after getting off work, I would go to the kitchen to prepare delicious meals. Liam would help me clean up. Laughter would fill the house. On weekends, I would bring my parents over. Would they sit on this comfortable sofa to watch TV, or go out to the balcony to enjoy the city views on their days off? What a beautiful vision that was. I had also invested a considerable sum in the interior design, $80,000, to do everything with high-end materials. I wanted everything to be perfect, durable. I picked out every kitchen cabinet, the bed, the vanity myself, measuring every inch. I trusted Liam to oversee the contractors and handle the payments to the furniture suppliers. At the time, I was swamped with the annual corporate tax deadlines at my firm. Liam also took charge of dealing with the real estate developer and making the installment payments according to the schedule. I naively thought we would soon be husband and wife, that my money was his money too. Letting him handle these things was a way for him to feel his responsibility as the pillar of our family. I looked at my watch. It was past noon. My stomach started to rumble, but I didn't feel tired at all. The joy of owning my dream home eclipsed everything. I took out my iPhone, snapped a few pictures of the terrace and the living room, and sent them to the family group chat with my parents and my little brother. Soon after, my phone vibrated non-stop with congratulatory texts and emojis. I smiled, feeling that all my efforts had paid off. Life seemed to be rolling out a red carpet for me, a stable career, a gorgeous home, a good fiancé, and a family that always supported me. I thought I was the luckiest woman in the world, but I had no idea that behind the apparent calm of the urban landscape, a massive storm was silently brewing, about to sink everything I had built with so much effort. And the cruelest schemes were coming precisely from the people I trusted the most, the ones I loved the most. My phone resting on the white marble kitchen island suddenly vibrated, breaking the afternoon silence. The familiar sound of an iMessage notification echoed, but this time it was insistent, continuous, as if foreshadowing something bad. I picked up the phone. The screen lit up, showing a notification from a group chat called Family First. It was Liam's family's private group chat, which I had been added to 2 months ago after the proposal. The person sending the message was Brenda, my future mother-in-law. It was a 30-second voice memo. I hit play. Brenda's shrill voice with her heavy Midwestern country twang echoed through the empty room. In the audio, Brenda spoke very fast in a euphoric tone, but the content left me paralyzed. She said she had already sold the land and the farmhouse to the neighbor down the road, that the next morning she was renting a U-Haul to bring all her religious knickknacks, her memories, the grandparents' photos, and all her junk to the city, to live with us. She said the condo we bought was too big with 3 huge bedrooms, and what was a young couple going to do with so much space? Leaving it empty was a waste, she said. She was coming to take care of the house, hold the keys, do the grocery shopping, and cook so we could work in peace. I listened to the message 3 times, my hands and feet shaking, unable to believe what I was hearing. My ears were ringing. My heart was pounding as if it wanted to burst out of my chest. Selling the farmhouse, moving in to live with us, neither Liam nor Brenda had consulted me about a single word of this. It was a life-altering decision. How could they decide this on their own without asking my opinion? The true owner of this house, I took a deep breath. Maybe Brenda was joking or just visiting for a while, but that confident tone, the story about selling the house to the neighbor, and bringing all her belongings, it was clearly a calculated plan. They were just waiting for the condo to be ready to execute it. Suddenly, I felt a chill run down my spine on a hot afternoon. I quickly dialed Liam's number. The ringing tones felt long and endless, burning me up inside. On the 3rd call, Liam picked up. In the background, I could hear traffic and wind. He was probably driving. I asked him directly about Brenda's message. My voice, though, trying to contain the tremor, revealed my absolute bewilderment. Liam stammered through the speakerphone that he was driving, that we would talk in person when he got home. His evasive and hesitant attitude only increased the vague unease I was feeling. He knew. I was sure he knew about this beforehand, but he had hidden it from me. I collapsed onto the sofa. A feeling of emptiness invaded my mind. The condo of my dreams just handed over. The joy hadn't even lasted a moment, and worry was already looming over me. It wasn't that I was a selfish daughter-in-law who didn't want to care for her mother-in-law, but Brenda's way of acting and Liam's silence made me feel utterly disrespected. I was the one who put up 90% of the money to buy this place. I was the one facing the massive monthly mortgage, and yet I was the last to know who was going to live in my own home. I looked around the condo again. The furniture I had chosen with such care suddenly felt foreign. Brenda said she was coming to manage the money and the food. The word manage sounded so heavy, so imposing. I was used to living independently, to being financially autonomous since I was very young. For someone to suddenly want to interfere in my private life, to take control in my own home, who wouldn't be bothered by that? Besides, the habits of 2 generations of 2 different worlds, rural and urban, were completely different. Brenda was a traditional countrywoman who pinched every penny sometimes to the point of being painfully frugal, and who was also critical and obsessed with minor details. I, on the other hand, was a modern corporate woman working in a high-pressure environment who needed comfort and privacy upon coming home. A clash was inevitable, but more terrifying than the differences in lifestyle was the feeling of being ambushed, of being presented with a done deal. Another message popped up, this time a photo Brenda sent to the group. It was a picture of a messy pile of junk being packed into moving boxes with an arrogant caption. "Got everything packed, just waiting for the right time to hit the road." Seeing the stacked cardboard boxes bursting at the seams, and a couple of old trunks, I felt like I was suffocating. The elegant, sophisticated living space I had designed with such care was about to be invaded by old, out-of-place objects, and the imposing presence of a calculating mother-in-law. I didn't reply to any messages in the group. I needed a satisfactory explanation from Liam. I needed to know my place in this family, wife, daughter, or simply an ATM for them to carry out their plans. The afternoon sun began to set, casting long, uneven patches of light on the floor. The doorbell rang shrilly, interrupting my confused thoughts. I looked through the digital peephole and saw Liam standing there, sweating profusely, his dress shirt clinging to his back, but with a strange look of joy on his face. I opened the door. Liam walked in, bringing the sweltering heat of the hallway with him. As he took off his shoes, he smiled and said, "Wow, the AC feels great in here, Chloe, and look at these views, really worth the money." He walked around the living room, stroking the sofa, tapping the wooden table, looking highly satisfied. His carefree attitude was as if his mother's message had never existed, or as if it were happy news to celebrate. I stood with my arms crossed, leaning against the wall, coldly watching his performance. When Liam turned and saw my serious face, the smile vanished from his lips. He walked over, trying to put his arm around me, but I took a step back, dodging his touch. I asked him directly about the sale of his mother's house, and her moving in. I asked him why he hadn't discussed such an important matter with me. Why had he let his mother sell her house without us agreeing on anything? My voice was firm, trying to stay calm, but every word was as sharp as a knife. Liam looked flustered for a moment. His eyes avoided mine. He scratched his head, forced a smile, and started to make excuses. He said his mother had decided everything very quickly, that it had caught him by surprise too, but that thinking about it, what his mother was doing was out of love for her children and future grandchildren. He said that by selling the Indiana house, she had gotten a good chunk of cash that she would give it to us to help with the debts, and that here she would take care of the cooking and cleaning. We'll just have to work and make money. We'll live like kings, he said. Listening to him felt ridiculous. Live like kings, or put a noose around my neck. I asked Liam if his mother was coming to visit, or to stay permanently. Liam answered casually, to stay, of course. She sold her house, where else is she gonna go? He added that his mother would take charge of the finances and manage the household expenses to save money. He said I spent too much on clothes at Nordstrom and on expensive makeup, and that it was better for his mother to manage the budget. That way, in the future, we'd have a college fund for the kids. At that moment, I couldn't hold back anymore. I looked Liam dead in the eye and asked him what right he had to let his mother manage my money. The money for the condo was mine. I was paying the mortgage. I was covering the household expenses. If his mother came to live with us, I was willing to care for her. But interfering in my finances and my private life was unacceptable. I made my stance clear. A marriage needs its own space. The decision for his mother to move in had to be discussed and agreed upon by both of us, not imposed as a forced reality. Liam's face darkened. His attitude completely changed. He furrowed his brow, and his voice turned harsh. He accused me of being calculating and stingy with his mother, of having selfish thoughts before even becoming his wife. He brought up the tired argument of filial duty to lecture me. He said his mother had sacrificed her whole life for him. Now that she was older, it was only natural and decent that she move in with her son. He even said that since I had a high salary, I would pay the bills, and his mother would put in the manual labor. So, we were even. Where was the downside? Liam's words were like a bucket of ice water. It turns out that in his eyes, my parents' sacrifices and the money I had earned with my own sweat were worth nothing compared to the chores his mother was going to do. He considered my obligation to financially support the house as something natural, while his mother's control over everything was a matter of morality. The twisted logic of a mama's boy became glaringly obvious. Making me shudder, I looked at the man I was about to marry, and suddenly he seemed like a complete stranger. This wasn't the kind understanding Liam I had fallen in love with. In front of me was a weak, selfish, and calculating man. He didn't care about my feelings. He didn't respect my contributions. He only thought about his own benefit and his mother's. I asked Liam what his mother planned to do with the money from the sale of her house. Liam stammered for a bit, and then said his mother would keep it for her own things, that she would only use it in case of an extreme emergency. So everything was clear. I bought the condo, I paid the debts, but his mother was moving in, taking control and keeping the cash from her house sale for herself. Such cunning calculation, it bordered on cruelty. The argument reached a stalemate. Liam stormed off into the bedroom and slammed the door, leaving me alone in the living room. The afternoon sun had completely set, plunging the room into shadows. I sat on the cold floor. Tears began to fall. I wasn't crying over the money, but over the betrayal of my trust. I began to doubt this marriage. Would love be strong enough to overcome these petty material calculations? Or had I just been a pawn in their scheme from the very beginning? In the dark, I remembered my friend's warnings about gold-digging in-laws. I had always ignored them, believing Liam was different. But now, every gesture, every word from Liam fit together like puzzle pieces, gradually revealing a distorted, ugly picture of reality. I knew this was going to be a long, sleepless night. That night, I lay awake on the firm new mattress, staring at the drywall ceiling. Beside me, Liam was already snoring, a carefree snore that seemed to mock the anxiety swirling inside me. Being a CPA had forged an analytical character in me, especially sensitive to numbers and risks. Any inconsistency in cash flow or a process made the alarms in my head go off. And that night, those alarms were blaring. I mentally reconstructed the entire home buying process, from the earnest money deposit, the signing of the purchase contract, to the installment payments, and most recently, the closing and title deed paperwork. Suddenly it hit me. I realized a fatal loophole that, out of overconfidence and being overworked, I had overlooked. Every time a deadline to pay the developer came up, I would wire the money to Liam so he could drop off the cashier's check. The reason was that my bank's online wire limit was restricted daily. Going to the bank in person was impossible since I couldn't take time off during the insane tax season. Liam always volunteered for the task. He said that as a sales rep he had a flexible schedule, and it was on his way. I trusted him blindly. I still had the confirmation messages for the transfers. The memos were clear. Transfer. Condo payment. 1, payment 2. But the person dealing directly with the developer, the one receiving the payment receipts, was Liam. The most suspicious thing was the day we signed the initial purchase contract. Liam told me he had an unexpected business trip to Denver and wouldn't make it in time to sign with me. He assured me he had spoken to a contact at the developer's office to let him sign early or find a workaround so as not to delay the process. "You just worry about the money," he had said. At the time, it seemed a bit odd, but Liam's explanation was very smooth. Plus, I was drowning in tax returns, so I accepted it. Then, 2 months ago, when it was time to finalize the deed and title at closing, Liam again volunteered to handle the paperwork. He said bureaucratic stuff was a pain, that it was too hot outside, and it was better for a guy like him to stand in line while I stayed cool in my air-conditioned corporate office making the big bucks. How touched I felt by his consideration then. But now, thinking about it, was it consideration, or a perfectly orchestrated play to keep me away from the most important legal process? Why did he always find a way to go alone at the decisive moments? Why did his mother feel she had the authority today to announce she was selling her actively house to move in and take over, as if this condo, rightfully, belonged to her family? My gut told me something shady was happening behind my back. An organized, calculated scam. I got up quietly and went out to the balcony with my phone. The cool night wind couldn't calm the fire in my head. I opened my Chase banking app and reviewed the transaction history for the last 2 years. The figures appeared crystal clear: $50,000, $30,000, $40,000. It all flowed into Liam's account. In total, I had transferred almost $200,000 in cash to him, not counting the money for the interior design. I called Erin, my best friend, who is an attorney. Erin answered with a sleepy voice, but when I explained my suspicions, she woke up instantly. Erin warned me that if my name was not on the legal documents, no matter how much money I had put in legally, I was at risk of walking away with nothing. She advised me to go to the county recorder of deeds office first thing in the morning to verify the legal status of the property. Erin's words gave me strength. I couldn't just sit around waiting for disaster to strike. I couldn't let 10 years of my youth and hard work be stolen in such a blatant way. I went back to the bedroom and looked at Liam, who was sleeping soundly. A feeling of disgust mixed with pity washed over me. The man I had loved with all my being, the one I was going to entrust my entire life to. He was the mastermind behind this farce. The next morning, I got up very early. I carefully applied my makeup to hide the dark circles under my eyes. I lied to Liam. I told him I had an urgent early meeting with some international clients and had to leave. Liam, still half asleep, just mumbled an acknowledgement and pulled the comforter back over his head. Seeing his unbothered attitude made my determination to get to the bottom of this even stronger. I started my car and merged into the dense morning Chicago traffic. My destination wasn't my corporate office in the Loop, but the Cook County Recorder of Deeds office. In my head, there was only one question: whose names are on that deed? The answer would decide the fate of my marriage and my life. I pressed the gas pedal, advancing like a warrior heading into a life-or-death battle. A battle to protect my honor and my assets. By 9:00 a.m., the Chicago sun was already starting to bite, casting heat off the steaming asphalt. I was standing inside the county building. Sweat dampened my blouse. The air was thick with the smell of paper ink and the impatience of hundreds of people waiting their turn. I pulled a ticket and sat on a plastic chair in the waiting area. A monotone, cold voice announced numbers over the PA system. Number 205, window 4. Number 206, window 5. Every time the speaker cracked, my heart skipped a beat. Around me, people were fanning themselves with file folders. Others were shouting on their phones about property disputes. The chaotic, stifling scene only added to my tension. I stared at the slip of paper in my hand. Number 215. Almost 10 numbers to go. Time dragged with maddening slowness. I gripped the handle of my purse. Inside, I had my driver's license and a photocopy of the initial purchase agreement, the fragile only proof that tied me to that house. Finally, my number flashed on the screen. I quickly walked up to window 3, where a young clerk with thick-rimmed glasses was typing frantically on her computer. I explained my request. I wanted a copy of the property record and deed for the condo I had purchased, stating I needed to verify the legal status. The clerk looked at me over her glasses, handed me a form to fill out, and pointed me toward the cashier to pay the processing fees. The bureaucracy was tedious, but in that moment I acted mechanically like a programmed robot. After paying, I returned to hand over the receipt and waited for the printout. Those 15 minutes of waiting felt like a century. My mind conjured up all sorts of scenarios. If my name was on the deed, I would go back. I would apologize to Liam for doubting him and find a way to make peace with my mother-in-law. But if not, I didn't dare think further. I feared the raw truth would shatter my heart. Chloe Davis, pick up your documents. The clerk's voice snapped me back to reality. I jumped up and practically ran to the window. The clerk handed me a few sheets of paper with the official county seal. I held the property record in my hands, my eyes glued to the grantee, owner section. The black, bold letters appeared before me, clear, sharp, and brutally cruel. Owners Liam Jenkins, born 1994, and Brenda Jenkins, born 1970. Form of acquisition, joint tenancy, 50% interest each. I rubbed my eyes and read it again and again. My name wasn't there. Nowhere on that paper did the name Chloe Davis appear. Only Liam and his mother. Mother and son, co-owners of the home that I had paid 90% for with my blood, sweat, and tears. The world crumbled at my feet. My ears rang. The sounds around me grew distant and muffled. I stumbled back a few steps and had to lean against the counter to keep from falling. A bitter taste of betrayal rose in my throat, squeezing my chest until I couldn't breathe. So it had all been a farce, a perfectly staged play by the man I loved and his mother. They had taken advantage of my trust, my love, and my lack of free time to pull off this monumental scam. Liam always finding excuses to handle the paperwork alone. Liam telling me to just wire him the money and not worry. Liam's mother selling her house to move in. Now all the pieces fit together into a disgusting picture of the truth. They didn't just want my money. They wanted to convert my personal hard-earned assets into the exclusive property of their family. If I married Liam, this condo would still belong to him and his mother. If we got divorced, I would walk away empty-handed. Wicked. Utterly wicked. I crushed the property record in my hand. The paper wrinkled under the pressure of my trembling, rage-filled fingers. I didn't cry. The pain was so immense, it had consumed any tear of weakness. In its place, a flame of pure hatred violently ignited inside me. I walked out of the county building. The midday sun was so glaring it felt like it wanted to scorch the entire city, but my heart burned hotter than the sun. I didn't go back to the office, nor did I go home. I stopped at a nearby coffee shop. I ordered a black iced coffee. No sugar. The bitter taste helped clear my mind. I took out my phone, snapped a photo of the deed, and texted it to Aaron. Then I opened my banking app and began downloading all the wire transfer statements from the last few years. I wasn't going to make a scene. I wasn't going to scream and cry. I am a financial professional. I speak with numbers, evidence, and the law. This war had only just begun. I was going to get back everything that was mine down to the last cent, and the price Liam's family would pay for this betrayal would be far higher than they could ever imagine. I took a deep breath, lifted my chin, and watched the bustling traffic. The Chloe of yesterday, the naive girl who believed in rose-colored love, died in that county recorder's office. Now there was only a strong, cunning Chloe ready to fight to the bitter end. I left the coffee shop with a chaotic mind but filled with iron resolve. I didn't return to the firm. Instead, I drove straight to our rental apartment in Lincoln Park. It was 2:00 p.m. Liam was still at his office, so the apartment was dead silent. I walked into the bedroom, looked at the familiar objects we had bought together over the last 3 years, and a pang of bitterness shot through me. That big-screen TV was bought with my Christmas bonus last year. That custom oak dining table was my birthday gift to him. Everything was steeped in memories. But now they were just mute witnesses to a love built on lies. I sat at the desk and booted up my laptop. The first thing I did was log into my Chase and Bank of America accounts. As a CPA, I have a habit of managing my finances with extreme rigor, but I never thought I'd be using my professional skills to take down my fiancé. I selected a date range going back 2 years when we first started thinking about buying a place. I exported the entire transaction history into an Excel spreadsheet, the screen filled with data. I began filtering the rows by the payee Liam Jenkins. Liam Jenkins. The results made my blood run cold. A long list of wire transfers appeared clearly. The 15th of June, 2024. Transfer of 15,000. Memo Chloe transfer to Liam. Earnest money downtown condo. The 20th of August 2024. Transfer of $150,000. Memo Chloe transfer. Payment 1 and partial 2 to developer. The 10th of May 2025. Transfer of $80,000. Memo payment for interior design contractors. I summed it all up. A grand total of $280,000 in cash, including the $50,000 from my parents that I had wired directly to Liam to pay for the house and furniture, not even counting other minor expenses like HOA fees or property. Taxes I had also transferred to him. I opened iMessage on my Mac and synced all my texts. I took screenshots of the conversations between Liam and me. Just wire it to me. I'm passing by the developer's office anyway. I'll drop off the cashier's check so it's done. Message from Liam on August 20. Mom says we should just put my name as the proxy for now, and when we get married, we'll merge it all into joint assets anyway. Don't worry. We're family. Message from Liam when I asked about the title paperwork earlier this year. Back then, I read those texts with absolute trust and immense love. Now rereading them, I only saw cold calculation. He had laid the groundwork preying on my naivety and my busy schedule to legally steal my assets step by step. Those texts paired with the bank statements were irrefutable proof that the money for the house was mine regardless of whose name was on the deed. I called Aaron. Aaron is a civil litigator who specializes in family and property law, and my best friend since college. She picked up immediately. I gave her the rundown, trying to keep my voice steady so I wouldn't break down. Hearing me, her tone turned dead serious and sharp. Aaron told me to stay calm and not to alert Liam just yet. She instructed me to compile all the PDFs of the bank statements, the screenshots, and the copy of the original purchase agreement I had kept, and email them to her via a secure link immediately. Aaron stressed that in civil lawsuits, tracing the flow of funds is paramount. The court would judge based on actual financial contribution, not just the names on a title. Hearing, Aaron gave me a sliver of peace. I sat there and began categorizing, highlighting every transfer, clearly noting the date and purpose. I worked like a machine, pushing aside any feelings of grief. I told myself that crying now wouldn't solve anything. The traitor wouldn't repent because of my tears. Only the law, only justice could punish them and return what was rightfully mine. The sun started to set, casting a pale golden light through the window. I checked the time. 5:00 p.m. Liam was about to get off work. I had to finish everything before he set foot in the apartment. I saved all the files to a flash drive, uploaded a backup to my personal Google Drive, and emailed everything to Aaron. I cleared my browser history and shut down the laptop. The room returned to its usual silence, but inside me a massive hurricane was brewing. Those cold, impersonal bank statements had become my sharpest weapon. They knew how to speak, and they would tell the raw truth about the real faces of Liam's family before the court of conscience and the court of law. At 7:00 p.m., Liam got home. He kept up his fake cheerful attitude, as always asking if I had eaten dinner and how work was. Seeing that smile on his face made my stomach turn. I used the excuse that I had a migraine, that I was exhausted from work stress, and that I just wanted to go to sleep early without eating. Liam didn't suspect a thing. He even acted solicitous, telling me to rest and that he'd just whip something up for himself. I lay in bed facing the wall, listening to Liam banging around in the kitchen and the sound of the TV in the living room. Every noise was like a needle piercing my eardrums. I closed my eyes but couldn't sleep. My mind was wired, plotting my every next move. I couldn't stay in this apartment a second longer. The thought of seeing Liam's face every day, of having to fake happiness with the man who conned me, was repulsive. By midnight, Liam's snores echoed rhythmically from the other side of the bed. The yellowish glow from the streetlights filtered through the blinds, illuminating the sleeping face of the man I once loved. He looked so harmless while asleep, but who knew what dark soul hid behind that exterior? I slipped out of bed quietly, leaving the bedroom door cracked open. I began my move in the dark. I didn't turn on any lights. I just used my phone screen to guide me. I opened the closet and pulled out the large hardshell suitcase I used for business trips. I only packed the essentials and things of value to me. First, the jewelry box with the vintage gold my mom gave me for the engagement, and a necklace from my college graduation. Then my personal documents, passport, social security card, my CPA license, my degree. These were indispensable things I couldn't leave behind. I packed my work clothes, my favorite dresses, my laptop chargers, and the external hard drive with important data. I packed everything meticulously. I did it all in absolute silence, moving as lightly as a cat. Sweat beaded on my forehead, but I barely dared to breathe. I took one last look around the rental apartment. I decided to leave the big electronics, like the TV and appliances. First, because I couldn't haul them out in the middle of the night. Second, so Liam wouldn't suspect I had left for good. I wanted him to think I had just gone on a sudden business trip or back to my parents' house in Indiana for a few days. My sudden disappearance would be the first psychological blow I dealt him. At 3:00 a.m., my suitcase was zipped shut. I put on comfortable clothes, slung my backpack over my shoulder, and rolling the suitcase slipped out the front door. The click of the deadbolt sounded softly in the dead of night, making my heart skip a beat. I took one last glance toward the bedroom. Goodbye, Liam. Goodbye to my naive past. As of this moment, we are nothing. I pulled my SUV out of the parking garage and loaded the suitcase into the trunk. The cold night wind of Chicago hit my face, but I felt an incredible lightness. The suffocating feeling that had crushed me for the past 24 hours vanished, replaced by a sense of liberation. I started the engine. The low hum broke the silence of the alley. I sped off into the night, merging onto I-65 south towards Indiana, heading to my parents' beloved home. The streets of Chicago at 3:00 a.m. were deserted, dotted only by a few delivery trucks and street sweepers. I drove while crying. The tears streamed down my cheeks, blurring my vision. I cried for my 3 years of young love, for my broken trust, for my own foolishness. But this would be the last time I cried over that despicable man. I arrived at my parents' house just before 5:00 a.m. The familiar country house sat in silence. I didn't dare knock for fear of waking them up. I sat on the porch steps, resting my head against my suitcase, waiting for dawn. The scent of pine and morning dew hung in the air. The smell of my childhood of peace. I closed my eyes, feeling like a lost little girl who had finally found her way back home. I was safe here. Here I had my family, the strongest pillar to lean on to face the coming storm. By 7:00 a.m., I was sitting at my parents' kitchen island. They had woken up early and were shocked to see their daughter with all her luggage. But seeing my swollen eyes, they knew something terrible had happened. I asked them to let me handle one piece of business before I explained everything in detail. My parents nodded and quietly started brewing coffee and making breakfast, giving me space. I opened my laptop and drafted an email to Liam. At the same time, I copied the text and sent it via iMessage to both him and Brenda. The subject line was brief but devastating: notice of broken engagement and demand for restitution of funds. In the email, I laid out every point clearly, logically, and firmly, exactly as someone who works with numbers should. First, I declared the termination of my engagement to Liam Jenkins. The reason I cited was the fraudulent manipulation of property titles and the utter lack of respect for me. I stated that there was no longer any emotional tie between us. Second, I attached a PDF of the property record I had pulled from the county the day before. The document clearly showed the names of Liam Jenkins and Brenda Jenkins on the deed. It was irrefutable proof of their deception. Third, I attached the Excel spreadsheet with the detailed breakdown of all the wire transfers I had made to Liam for the purchase of the condo and the furnishings. The principal capital was $280,000. Adding the opportunity cost and bank interest calculated at standard deposit rates over the last 2 years, the figure I demanded they return was $300,000. I wrote, "I demand that you and your family return the sum of $300,000 to me within 7 days from today. This is the money earned with the blood, sweat, and tears of myself and my parents. If 7 days pass and I have not received the full amount, I will proceed to file a lawsuit in civil court and report your family to the police for suspected wire fraud and grand theft. I do not wish to argue or debate further. Let us resolve this within the framework of the law. Do not attempt to contact me to explain or beg. It is useless." I reread the email one last time, took a deep breath, and hit send. Immediately after, I sent the same text via group chat to Liam and Brenda. As soon as the read receipts popped up, I blocked their phone numbers, their social media profiles, and every single one of their relatives. I didn't want to hear any excuses, any insults, any pleading. I needed to keep a cool head to prepare for the legal battle. My phone rang from an unknown number. I knew exactly that it was Liam using a burner or someone else's phone. I turned off the device, popped out the SIM card, and swapped it for a new prepaid SIM I had picked up at a gas station on the way. From now on, only the people who truly mattered could reach me. I imagined the chaotic scene at Liam's apartment right now. Brenda was probably screaming and cursing at the top of her lungs. Liam was likely panicking, realizing I had all the receipts in hand and that my decision was final. They thought I was an easy mark, a sheep they could fleece just by putting the deed in their names, and that would be the end of it. But they were dead wrong. When a sheep is cornered, it can turn into a lion to defend itself. I closed my laptop, feeling a massive weight lift off my shoulders, though I knew the road to recovering my money would be brutal. At least I had officially declared war. I was no longer a passive victim. I was the plaintiff demanding justice. The delicious smell of homemade pot roast wafted from the stove. My mom appeared with a steaming bowl and set it in front of me. "Eat, sweetie. Eat so you have the strength to fight. Even if the sky falls, Mom and Dad are here to hold you up." My mother's words made my eyes well up with tears again, but this time, they were tears of gratitude. I picked up my spoon, tasted the hearty broth, and felt its comforting warmth. She was right. I had to eat. I had to live well and stay strong, because I wasn't alone in this fight. Breakfast that morning in my parents' home passed in a solemn but strangely warm atmosphere. While I ate, I told them the whole story from start to finish. I didn't hide a single detail, from Brenda's intention to move in the deed in the mother and son's names to my decision to call off the wedding and demand the money back. I also showed my dad the folder with the bank statements and the property record. My dad put on his reading glasses and examined the papers carefully. He didn't say a word while I spoke. Only his gray eyebrows furrowed, his weather-beaten face hardened with quiet fury. My dad is a man who has lived his whole life with honesty and principles. He probably couldn't imagine that people so blatantly fraudulent existed, let alone regarding something as serious as marriage. When I finished speaking, my mom sitting next to me was crying quietly. She squeezed my hand tightly. Her thin, warm hand transferred her strength to me. She said bitterly, "My poor girl, what terrible luck you've had. I thought you found a good partner, and it turns out you walked into a den of thieves." My dad took off his glasses and set them gently on the island. He looked at me with a steady gaze without a hint of reproach. I was afraid he would scold me for being naive, for trusting blindly. But no, he just said one resolute sentence. "You did the right thing. The sooner you cut ties with those people, the better. With folks that twisted, if you had married him, you would have suffered your whole life. It would have been hell." My dad took a sip of his black coffee. His voice dropped lower. Lost money can be recovered, but lost dignity never comes back. Consider it the tuition fee for the school of life. A pretty expensive tuition, but it taught you how to see people for who they really are. Then he stood up, walked to his bedroom, and came back with his 401k statements and a stack of emergency cash. He placed it in front of me. Mom and I are old. I saved this over years at the plant. Take it to hire a lawyer. The best one you can find in Chicago. Take them to court, to the bitter end. Not just for the money, but to teach that family a moral lesson. We can't let wickedness and deceit get away scotangent-free. I looked at my dad's retirement papers with a heavy heart. That was money for their medical bills for their golden years. How could I accept it? I pushed the papers back toward him, shaking my head. I can't take this, Dad. I still have some savings. I can manage. Keep it for emergencies. I'm so sorry for causing you this worry at your age. My dad, frowning, pushed the papers back into my hands. Take it. Mom and I are fine. We get by on soup and bread just fine. You're in a tough spot. If we don't help you, who will? Family is for leaning on during storms like this. Don't make me mad. Hearing that, I didn't dare refuse anymore. I took the folder, tears rolling down my cheeks. In this humble country house, the only truly valuable asset was my parents' immense love. A total contrast to that luxury penthouse, which was cold, filled with calculations and deceit. I realized that the value of a home doesn't lie in expensive furniture or skyline views, but in the people who live in it. My mom wiped my tears and patted my shoulder. That's enough now, no more crying. Where there's life, there's hope. My daughter is strong and brave. If you lose this, you'll build something bigger and better. The important thing is, you escaped that trap. Tonight I'm making that chicken casserole you love so much. Okay. Family dinner that day was bathed in tears, but also filled with laughter and faith. I felt like I had been given 1,000 times more strength. With my parents by my side, I wasn't afraid of anything anymore. No matter how fierce the storm outside the door to this house, would always be open to welcome me, to protect and love me unconditionally. With this solid pillar, I was ready for the brutal legal battle ahead. 2 days after sending my ultimatum, there was no word from Liam regarding returning the money. However, they had launched a vile counterattack campaign on social media, just as my lawyer Aaron and I had anticipated. That evening, while reviewing the case file with Aaron via Zoom, my phone started blowing up with Facebook notifications. Friends and former coworkers were constantly sending me weird links. Curiosity got the better of me, and I clicked one. It was a TikTok video that was going viral, with millions of views and tens of thousands of comments. In the video, Brenda was sitting on the floor in front of the door of the new penthouse, looking pathetic, her hair a mess, crying crocodile tears. She cried and complained in total victim mode. She claimed that her future daughter-in-law was a city elite, who just because she had a little money looked down on her fiancé's humble country family. She spun a tale that I had sweet-talked her into selling her farmhouse to pool money for the condo, promising I would take care of her in her old age. But once the house was sold and the cash was handed over, I had changed my mind, broken the engagement, and kicked them to the curb, leaving her homeless and forced to live on charity. She didn't mention a single word about whose names were actually on the deed, nor about the hundreds of thousands of dollars I had put in. She focused entirely on attacking my reputation, painting herself as a poor, innocent, salt-of-the-earth mother tricked by a greedy, calculating corporate city girl. In the comments, netizens, ignorant of the truth, dogpiled on me with insults. Cruel and offensive remarks flooded the section. Modern women are shameless. She looks so sweet, but has the heart of a snake. Cancel her. People like that belong in jail. Some had even found my personal LinkedIn and Facebook profiles, posting my photo with defamatory captions. Scammer. Heartless. My heart pounded, my hands shaking with rage. I couldn't believe they were brazen enough to flip the script like this. They were weaponizing public opinion to pressure me, to force me to back down or settle. It was a common tactic these days, play the victim to farm sympathy online. Erin, watching the video on her end of the call, shook her head. Relax, don't get mad, Chloe. The more they do this, the more they shoot themselves in the foot. This is textbook defamation of character and libel. We are going to preserve all this digital evidence immediately. Though Erin reassured me, I couldn't help but feel anxious. The power of the internet mob is terrifying. If I didn't stop this in time, my reputation and my career would be severely damaged. I dreaded the thought of walking into the corporate office tomorrow with everyone glaring at me in disgust. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was an SMS from an unknown number. The text was short, but threatening. If you know what's good for you, drop the lawsuit and leave us alone. If not, I'll get you fired, and you'll never be able to show your face in Chicago again. I knew it was Liam. His true colors were fully exposed. He was no longer the docile, nice guy fiancé, but a two-bit thug. I took a deep breath, trying to calm down. I looked at Aaron on the screen with determination. Aaron, proceed with the evidence preservation. I'm not scared. If you've done nothing wrong, you have nothing to fear. We'll sue them for defamation and harassment too. I closed Facebook, determined not to read a single comment more. I understood that this war wasn't just being fought in the courtroom, but also in the court of public opinion and psychological warfare. They wanted me to break down, to be afraid. But I wasn't going to let them. There is only one truth, and I held it in my hands. Outside night blanketed the Midwest, but inside me the fire of resistance burned brighter than ever. Tomorrow, I would walk out, with my head held high. I would show the world who the real victim was, and who the scammers disguised as honest folks truly were. Monday morning, the atmosphere in my high-end corporate building in the Chicago Loop was as bustling and fast-paced as ever. I walked into the grand lobby in my tailored suit, trying to keep my composure. Though inside I was a bundle of nerves because of the internet rumors, I told myself I had to hold my head high. I hadn't done anything wrong. I was the victim. I had no reason to hide. Just as I passed through the revolving doors, a commotion near the reception desk caught my attention. A crowd had gathered, pointing and whispering. A sinking feeling washed over me. My heart started to race. I pushed my way through the crowd, and the sight chilled my blood. Brenda and Liam were there in the middle of the luxurious marble lobby, but they hadn't come for a civil chat. They were holding up a white poster board, with red, hand-painted letters, "Chloe Davis is a scammer, stole our money, heartless. Daughter-in-law kicks elderly mother to the street." Brenda was dressed in shabby clothes, wearing a scarf over her head as if she were in mourning. Using a cheap bullhorn, she was wailing inconsolably. She yelled to everyone who would listen that I had tricked her into selling her farmhouse, stolen her life savings, and then called off the wedding, leaving her homeless. Her voice echoed off the high ceilings, drawing the attention of hundreds of corporate employees arriving for work. Liam, standing next to her, kept his head down but firmly held one end of the banner. He didn't dare look people in the eye, but his participation was the most cowardly form of complicity. They wanted to ruin my life, get me fired, strip me of my dignity, so I would crawl to them on my knees, begging for mercy. Building security quickly converged on the scene. The head of security firmly asked them to leave the premises for disturbing the peace, but Brenda threw herself onto the marble floor, kicking and screaming that she was being assaulted, that the corporate elites were abusing poor, working-class folks. It was a scene of chaos never before witnessed in this Class A office building. My coworkers from my firm began coming down the elevators. Glances of curiosity, pity, and hushed whispers surrounded me. I clearly heard a receptionist whisper to someone that she never imagined Chloe, looking so polished, would steal from her mother-in-law. A wave of humiliation and shame washed over me. My face burned, my ears rang. I wanted to run to find a hole to crawl into, but then the image of the property deed without my name flashed in my mind. Their audacity had crossed every line. If I ran now, I would lose, and they would get away with it. I took a deep breath and regained my composure. I walked straight up to Liam and Brenda. Seeing me, Brenda shrieked even louder through the bullhorn, pointing at me and spewing the foulest insults. I didn't argue with her. I turned to the head of security and said in a loud, clear voice, "Please call the Chicago Police Department. This is criminal trespass, harassment, and defamation. I will wait right here until the police arrive." "I'm not moving." Hearing the word police, Liam started to shake. He tugged at his mother's arm, whispering that they should leave. But Brenda, emboldened by her own performance, swatted Liam's hand away and kept hurling insults. She thought that by making a huge scene, I would get scared for my corporate reputation and write them a check. She was dead wrong. My reputation was important, but justice was paramount. Lauren, the HR director at my firm, had just walked in. She looked at the banner, then at me. I looked her dead in the eye with unwavering resolve, not shying away from her gaze. I told her, "Lauren, I apologize that a personal legal matter has spilled into the workplace. But I assure you, everything they are claiming is a verifiable lie, and I am taking immediate legal action." Lauren nodded. She told me to stay calm, that the company would make decisions based on facts, not lobby stunts. A CPD squad car pulled up with its lights flashing outside the glass doors. 2 officers stepped out. Seeing the uniforms, Brenda shut up instantly. She scrambled clumsily to her feet and hastily rolled up the poster board. Her defiant attitude vanished, replaced by the sheer panic of someone who knew they had crossed the line. I briefly explained the situation to the officers and requested to file a formal police report. Liam and Brenda were escorted to the precinct. I followed in my own car to give my statement. Leaving the building, the Chicago sun was still shining, but I no longer felt its warmth. The humiliation from earlier had transformed into a cold block of steel in my chest. I realized that as of this moment, any residual emotional attachment was dead. The people standing opposite me were no longer my fiancé and mother-in-law, but enemies trying to steal the fruits of my labor. And I would fight to the bitter end to defend my honor. After giving my statement at the police station, I didn't go home. I took an Uber straight to Aaron's law office in River North. Aaron was waiting for me with a hot cup of tea. Seeing my exhausted appearance, but the fiery determination in my eyes, she knew the war had officially begun. Aaron told me that in the digital age, electronic evidence is easily deleted. Facebook posts and TikTok videos could be scrubbed the moment the other party felt cornered. Words blow away in the wind, but sworn documentation remains. That's why we needed a legally bulletproof method to freeze the truth. A digital forensics preservation and a sworn affidavit. Aaron explained that we would hire a specialized firm to capture the metadata URLs and video files, which she would then attach to an affidavit signed under penalty of perjury, making it admissible in court. It acts like a photograph of objective reality at a specific moment in time. I agreed immediately. I didn't care about the cost. Hiring the firm and processing the affidavits might cost a few $1,000s, but it was the steel shield that would protect me from the court of public opinion and Liam's family's lies. We got to work. First, the social media posts. The forensic tech recorded my screen as I navigated to the TikTok and Facebook accounts, spreading the defamatory videos. They logged every URL, every malicious comment, every share count. They captured the metadata, printed the screenshots, and prepared them for exhibit stamping. Next, Liam's threatening texts. The messages with vulgar language threatening to ruin me and get me fired were meticulously logged. The tech noted the sender's phone number, the timestamp, and the exact content. Finally, and most importantly, I had secured the security camera footage from my office building's lobby. I had asked building management and they cooperated fully, providing the MP4 file showing Brenda and Liam with their banners screaming and causing a disturbance that very morning. This video was irrefutable proof of harassment and disturbing the peace. The process took 3 hours. Every page was notarized and compiled into a thick legal binder. Holding that heavy file, I felt infinitely more secure. This wasn't just paper. It was certified truth. Even if Brenda deleted the video or denied her words, these affidavits would force her to admit fault in front of a judge. Erin patted my shoulder, her eyes full of confidence. She told me the next step would be our heaviest counterattack. We wouldn't just defend ourselves. We were going to attack their weak point, their greed, and their ignorance of the law. I looked out the window of the law office. The sky had darkened. Black clouds signaled a heavy thunderstorm rolling in off Lake Michigan, but I wasn't afraid of storms anymore. I had an umbrella, a raincoat, and most importantly, I knew the path home, a path called justice. I knew Liam and Brenda were probably gloating somewhere, thinking they had humiliated me at work, but they had no idea their stupid stunt had just handed me the most valuable evidence to corner them legally. The next morning, following a summons from the Chicago Police Department, detectives handling the harassment complaint, I arrived at the precinct right at 8:00 a.m. A police precinct is always solemn and cold. It commands respect. I was accompanied by Aaron. Aaron, having legal counsel present, ensured the detectives treated the matter with absolute rigor. 15 minutes later, Liam and Brenda walked in. Unlike their defiant stunt, the day before today, they looked pathetic. Liam wore a wrinkled polo shirt and had dark bags under his eyes. He probably hadn't slept from anxiety. Brenda was still in her shabby clothes, clutching her purse. She walked hunched over, looking out of the corners of her eyes with a mix of slyness and fear. The lead detective, a middle-aged man with a stern face and a gruff voice, ushered us into an interview room. On his desk lay the binder of preserved evidence and affidavits Aaron had messengered over the night before, along with the incident report from my building's security. The detective began questioning Brenda about the public disturbance and harassment at my workplace. At first, Brenda tried to deny everything. She yelled that she was my mother-in-law, that she had the right to discipline her daughter-in-law, that her money had been stolen, and she was just trying to get it back. She claimed it was a family matter, and the cops had no business interfering. The detective slammed his hand on the metal table, making Brenda jump and shut her mouth. In a severe voice, he laid out the reality. He told her point blank that first of all, since Chloe and Liam were not married, the law didn't recognize any mother-in-law relationship. There is no legal right to discipline anyone with defamatory signs in a corporate lobby. That is considered criminal trespass, harassment, and disorderly conduct under Illinois law. The detective spun his laptop monitor around to face Brenda. The video of her thrashing on the floor and screaming played crystal clear. He pointed to the thick binder of affidavits and said all the evidence was documented. If Chloe decided to press criminal charges or file a civil suit for intentional infliction of emotional distress, Brenda could be facing jail time, heavy fines, and a criminal record. Hearing the words jail time and criminal record, the color drained from Brenda's face. She started shaking and looked at Liam for help. But Liam was curled up in the corner like a turtle, not daring to make a peep. The cowardice of a man entirely dependent on his mother was more evident than ever. The detective continued his warning. He stated that publishing false information on social media to damage someone's career also constitutes civil libel. If she didn't take everything down immediately and issue a retraction, the police would escalate the harassment charges. At that moment, Brenda's stubbornness collapsed. She burst into tears, but it wasn't the cry of a victim. It was the cry of pure terror. She clasped her hands together, begging the detective for mercy. She said she was just a countrywoman who didn't understand the law, that someone had given her bad advice. She turned toward me, trying to grab my hand to beg, but Aaron quickly stepped between us. By the end of the meeting, Brenda and Liam were forced to sign a formal cease and desist agreement, legally binding them to stop any harassment, to remove all defamatory videos and posts from the internet, and to stay at least 500 feet away from my residence and workplace. Furthermore, they were slapped with a hefty citation for disorderly conduct. With the signed cease and desist in hand bearing Liam's shaky signature and the police precinct's stamp, I walked out onto the street. The Chicago sky, after the previous night's storm, was clear and bright blue. I filled my lungs with fresh air with freedom. I had won the first round of the legal battle. I had used the law to silence the slanderers, to force them to back down. But I knew this was only the tip of the iceberg. The real issue, the $280,000 I had invested, and the ownership of the condo was still unresolved. Liam's family wasn't going to let go of such a massive sum easily. They would try every trick in the book to liquidate the asset. I had to move faster than them. Aaron looked at me and nodded. We understood each other without speaking. Our next stop was the Cook County Circuit Court. That same afternoon, Aaron and I arrived at the Daly Center Courthouse. Aaron carried a massive briefcase containing the civil complaint meticulously drafted over several sleepless nights. It was a lawsuit for unjust enrichment, constructive trust, and fraud. It detailed the entire flow of funds used to purchase the property, accompanied by all the exhibits, bank statements, the original purchase, contract, the digital evidence affidavits, the texts, and the deed. However, filing the lawsuit was only the first step. The most critical part, as Aaron advised, was filing an emergency motion for a lis pendens, a notice of pending litigation, and a temporary restraining order, TRO. Aaron explained that a civil trial in Illinois can drag on for months, even years. During that time, if we did nothing, Liam and Brenda, as the title holders, could sell the condo to an unsuspecting third party, or take out a massive home equity loan, pocket the cash, and vanish. If that happened, even if I won the trial, the judgment would just be a piece of paper, because there would be no assets left to collect. I'd have a moral victory but be financially ruined. Therefore, the vital objective was to freeze the property, immediately asking the judge to issue an order prohibiting the sale or encumbrance of the disputed asset. We filed the complaint with the clerk of the circuit court. After paying the hefty filing fees, we went to the emergency motion judge's chambers. Aaron urgently laid out the flight risk of the defendants. As Exhibit A, she presented a text message Brenda had sent to a mutual acquaintance, stating she was looking for a cash buyer to flip the condo fast and get out of this mess. This was the smoking gun needed to convince the judge of the imminent danger. The judge examined the file carefully. Under Illinois civil procedure, given the overwhelming evidence of financial contribution and the threat of asset dissipation, the judge granted the motion. I was required to post a bond, a sum of money held by the court to guarantee my claim was filed in good faith. I wired the bond money to the court clerk that very afternoon. Everything moved at breakneck speed. I was in a race against the clock. One day, even 1 hour of delay, and Liam could be at a title company signing the condo away to someone else. At 1:00 a.m., The next day, I got a call from Erin. Her voice was euphoric. "We did it, Chloe. The judge signed the TRO, and the lis pendens is officially recorded with the county recorder. The property is frozen." I let out a massive sigh of relief and dropped my head onto my desk. The condo was locked down. The entire county's title system had updated the property's status, preventing any transactions. Even if Liam and Brenda wanted to sell, transfer, or mortgage it, no title company would touch it. The property was immobilized, awaiting the verdict of justice. I pictured the look on mother and son's faces when they inevitably tried to list it with a realtor, only to be told it was legally radioactive. They probably thought that just having their names on the deed gave them absolute power. They didn't realize that the law has powerful tools to protect equity, to protect those whose rights are trampled. The trap they had set for me had now snapped shut on them. Under U.S. civil procedure, before a case goes to a full trial, courts often require the parties to attempt mediation to reach a settlement. A month after filing the lawsuit, we were summoned to a mediator's office downtown. I walked into the conference room with confident strides. Erin was right beside me. Across the mahogany table, Liam and Brenda were already seated. They looked significantly more haggard after a month of having their primary asset frozen and living with looming anxiety. The mediator was an older woman with a kind face and a soft voice. She began the session by analyzing the situation, advising both parties to find middle ground to avoid a long, expensive, and exhausting trial. When it was Brenda's turn to speak, she sat up with that same old defiant attitude. "Ma'am," she said, "the money Chloe gave my son was a voluntary gift to win over her mother-in-law. A voluntary gift to help the new couple start out. A token of love. If it's a gift, you can't ask for it back just because she changed her mind and broke off the wedding. This condo is in our names. It's ours. Why should we give anything back?" I felt my blood boil. The concept of gifting almost $300,000 as a dowry to my mother-in-law was absurd. I asked to speak. Calmly, I laid out my evidence. "Madam Mediator, Miss Jenkins. Nobody gifts $300,000 as a dowry in modern America. In the wire transfer memos, I made it very clear. Condo purchase, payment to developer. Nowhere did I write gift or donation. Legally, this is a capital contribution to form a joint marital asset. The engagement was broken, so the contribution from each party must be returned. That is the law of equity." Liam, sitting next to his mother, kept his head down. He knew better than anyone that what I was saying was the truth, but his greed and cowardice stopped him from opening his mouth to admit it. His silence was a despicable form of complicity. The mediator turned to Liam. "Mr. Jenkins, you received the funds directly into your account. Do you have anything to say? Do you acknowledge that this money was Miss Davis's funds to buy the home?" Liam stammered, glancing sideways at his mother. Brenda shot him a death glare, warning him not to speak. Liam mumbled, "I think my mom is right. Chloe gave me that money so we could build a life together. If we're not together anymore, well, it is what it is." Liam's response made the mediator shake her head in disappointment. "You really should think this through," she advised. "The paper trail of the funds is crystal clear. If this goes to trial, attorney's fees will be astronomical, and the losing party may be ordered to pay them all, not to mention prejudgment interest. I strongly advise the defendants to find a way to return the principal sum to the plaintiff so you can keep the property." But Brenda dug her heels in. "I don't have the money. The cash from selling my farmhouse. I spent it paying off my own debts. This condo is mine. Who's going to take it from me? Let the judge decide whatever he wants. I'm not paying a single red cent." Brenda's stubborn, uncooperative attitude killed the mediation. The mediator sighed and signed the form, declaring impasse. She explained the case would now return to the docket for a bench trial before the judge. I signed the paperwork without an ounce of disappointment. I expected this. With people as blinded by greed as them, moral reasoning was useless. Only a final court judgment and the forceful execution of the state could make them spit out what they had swallowed. Leaving the room, Brenda tried to shoot one last barb. "All this suing for nothing, little girl. You're gonna walk away with empty pockets." I offered a faint smile and didn't reply. I looked at Liam one last time with the coldness one reserves for a total stranger. I felt pity for him, a grown man with no backbone, who let his mother's greed lead him down a path of dishonor and legal ruin. The upcoming trial would expose it all. I was ready for the final battle. Justice might be slow, but it always arrives. The morning of the 15th of May 2026. The Chicago sky was slate gray, drizzling a fine, cold rain. I stepped out of an Uber in front of the Alexander J. Daly Center, feeling a strange sense of peace. Today was the bench trial regarding the property dispute. After months of waiting, gathering evidence, and enduring attacks, the moment for the verdict had arrived. Courtroom 302 was fairly full. Aside from us, there were several law students and observers curious about the bizarre case of the mother-in-law and the daughter-in-law fighting over a luxury penthouse. A story that had generated some buzz in local legal circles. I sat at the plaintiff's table with Aaron. Across the aisle at the defense table, Liam and Brenda sat hunched over. Brenda had lost her defiant swagger. Her face was gaunt, her sunken eyes revealing profound anxiety. Liam maintained his old habit of staring at his shoes, avoiding eye contact at all costs. At 9:00 a.m. sharp, the bailiff ordered everyone to rise. The Honorable Judge Thomas entered in his black robe. The atmosphere in the courtroom turned absolutely solemn. After identifying the parties, the judge began the proceedings. He asked my counsel to present our case. Aaron stood up and with a clear voice explained every wire transfer, the intent to purchase the home in contemplation of marriage, and the defendant's deceit in secretly putting the deed in their names. When Aaron presented the evidence, she truly shined. She didn't just show the bank statements. She pulled out a smoking gun that left the courtroom dead silent. It was Liam's W-2s and federal tax returns from the last 3 years, which Aaron had subpoenaed during discovery. With a firm voice, Aaron demonstrated to the court that Liam's average gross income was barely $55,000 a year. After taxes and the high cost of living in Chicago, it was mathematically impossible for him to have saved hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash to buy a luxury penthouse. Meanwhile, my income as a corporate CPA was nearly quadruple that, as proven by my own tax returns and employment contracts. The massive disparity in financial capacity was the ultimate proof that the funds for the condo came entirely from me. The judge turned to Brenda to question her about the origin of her supposed funds. Brenda, sweating under oath, gave evasive answers. First, she claimed it was her life savings from working odd jobs in Indiana. Then she said relatives had loaned it to her. But when the judge asked her to produce proof of these loans, bank passbooks, or settlement statements from her farmhouse sale that matched the exact dates and amounts paid to the Chicago developer, Brenda had nothing. Not a single valid document. She stood trembling at the witness stand. The judge asked her a pointed question. "Ma'am, if your son received the funds from Miss Davis to buy a marital home, why is your name on the deed instead of hers?" Liam whispered from the table that his mother wanted it that way, and he just listened to her to keep her happy. That spineless answer made half the gallery shake their heads. A 30-year-old man with zero judgment, blinded by greed to the point of defrauding the woman he was supposed to marry. The trial lasted all morning. Every argument and excuse the defendants threw at the wall was systematically dismantled by Aaron with solid, logical, irrefutable documentary evidence. I watched Brenda sweating profusely despite the courtroom AC. I understood then that truth has immense power. It can be hidden for a time, but it can never be buried forever. After an hour recess for deliberation, the judge returned to the bench. Everyone held their breath. I squeezed Aaron's hand. My heart pounded, but it was full of hope. The judge adjusted his glasses and read his ruling. His voice echoed clearly across the wood-paneled room. Having reviewed the documentary evidence and the testimony provided, this court finds ample grounds to determine that the sum of $280,000 used for the purchase of the real property and its furnishings was the sole separate property of the plaintiff Chloe Davis. The fact that the defendants Liam Jenkins and Brenda Jenkins appear as title holders on the deed without being able to demonstrate an equivalent financial contribution constitutes a textbook case of unjust enrichment and constructive fraud. The court categorically rejects the defendant's argument that these funds were a gift. The court finds that the transfer of funds by Miss Davis was made in contemplation of marriage to establish a joint marital asset. Because the condition of marriage was not met, the receiving party has a legal and equitable obligation to restore the funds to the transferor. Regarding the claim for damages and interest, the court grants the plaintiff's request. Prejudgment statutory interest shall apply for the period the funds were wrongfully withheld. The judge looked down at the defendants. Judgment is hereby entered in favor of the plaintiff Chloe Davis. The defendants Liam Jenkins and Brenda Jenkins are held jointly and severally liable to pay the plaintiff the principal sum of $280,000, plus statutory interest and damages calculated at $80,000 for a total judgment of $360,000. Furthermore, the court imposes a constructive trust on the property and maintains the lis pendens and injunction against selling the property until the defendants satisfy this judgment in full. Costs of this suit and reasonable attorney's fees are awarded to the plaintiff. The bang of the judge's gavel echoed, concluding the trial. I burst into tears of happiness and hugged Aaron tight. They were tears of pure joy of victory. Justice had been served. All the humiliation and suffering of the past months had been washed away. Across the aisle, Brenda collapsed into her heavy wooden chair, her face ghost white. She covered her face and began sobbing and cursing her luck. Liam sat frozen like a statue, staring blankly ahead. They had lost in a landslide. Not only did they have to return every single dollar, but they were also saddled with massive interest penalties and my attorney's fees. The total figure was pushing $400,000, an unimaginably high price for their bottomless greed. I walked out of the courtroom with my head held high. My parents were waiting for me in the marble hallway. My dad hugged me, patting my back firmly. My mom couldn't stop crying tears of joy as she squeezed my hands. My family had won, not just financially, but morally. We had proven that no matter how cunning the wicked think they are, the law and reason will eventually side with honest people. The judgment became final 30 days later as Liam and Brenda did not file an appeal. They probably knew that with such overwhelming evidence against them, an appeal would only cost them more in legal fees. However, winning a judgment is one thing. Collecting the money is another. It's the arduous process lawyers know as winning the battle but not the war. Predictably, mother and son resorted to stall tactics. They claimed they had no liquid cash and kept dodging the issue. I wasn't surprised. I immediately instructed Aaron to file for a writ of execution to enforce the judgment. The Cook County Sheriff's Department handles these matters strictly. After serving the notice of execution and receiving no voluntary payment, the court ordered the levy and attachment of the assets securing the debt, the luxury penthouse where Liam and Brenda were living. The day the sheriff's deputies went to post the bright red notice of levy and sale on the door of the penthouse, the neighbors gathered in the hallway to watch the spectacle. Brenda was so mortified she didn't dare poke her head out. The home that had been her pride and joy was now legally seized, making her the laughingstock of the entire condo association. The deputy explained the procedure to Brenda through the cracked door. The property would be appraised and sold at a public sheriff's auction to satisfy the debt owed to me. The problem was that the downtown Chicago real estate market in 2026 was sluggish, with high interest rates killing liquidity. If it went to a forced auction, the starting bid would be significantly below market value. If there were no high bidders, it would sell for pennies on the dollar. Aaron had explained to me earlier that a condo purchased for $500,000 might only fetch $350,000 at a sheriff's sale. From that money, after deducting court costs, auction fees, and the original mortgage balance, whatever was left would go to me. Meaning mother and son wouldn't just lose the house. They would still owe me tens of thousands of dollars on the deficiency judgment. They would be left utterly ruined, homeless, and buried in insurmountable debt. Hearing the deputy's explanation, Brenda went into a blind panic. She realized that if she let the house go to auction, she would lose absolutely everything. She had already sold the farmhouse in Indiana. If she lost this penthouse, where would they live in a city as expensive as Chicago? Her greed had driven her into a dead end. Terror was etched into her aging face. She began begging the deputy to give them a few more days to get the cash. The deputy shook his head, stating that the law doesn't grant arbitrary extensions. The window for voluntary payment had long expired. If the full amount wasn't wired into the court's escrow account within 10 days, the auction process would officially commence. I observed this via updates from Aaron, feeling zero sympathy. I gave them the chance to mediate, to settle amicably, but they rejected it out of pure greed. Now they had to face the brutal reality of law and finance. It was the most expensive lesson of their lives, and they were being forced to learn it. Those final 10 days of the grace period were sheer agony for Liam's family. From what I heard through mutual acquaintances, Brenda was running around like a headless chicken. She called every relative back in Indiana begging for loans, but everyone refused. The infamous story of how she scammed her daughter-in-law had spread through their entire rural county. Nobody dared lend her a dime, knowing she was a massive liability. Liam was desperate. His buddies at work avoided him once they found out he was drowning in debt with no way to save his home. With no other options, his genius mother Brenda resorted to the absolute worst-case scenario predatory lenders. She took out a massive, high-risk, hard-money loan from shady lenders at exorbitant loan shark interest rates. Her plan was to get the cash to pay me off, stop the auction, and then figure it out later. Maybe she thought she could sell the condo on the open market down the line to pay off the loan sharks, but at least she wouldn't lose it to a foreclosure auction right now. The day of the payoff, Aaron and I arrived punctually at the Chase Bank branch in the Loop. Brenda and Liam were also there, accompanied by two massive tattooed men in cheap suits. The loan sharks muscle there to oversee the transaction and ensure the lien was placed on the property. The scene was ironic and deeply humiliating. At the teller counter, Liam signed the wire transfer authorization with shaking hands. Brenda, standing next to him with a scowl, muttered curses under her breath. She suddenly turned to Liam and snapped, "This is all your fault. For being an idiot and listening to that corporate bitch, look where we are now." What a disaster. Liam didn't stay quiet. He yelled back at his mother right in the middle of the bank lobby. "Shut up. You were the one who dragged me into this. You were the one who wanted the house in your name, who wanted to control everything. Whose fault is it now, huh? We're screwed and now we're paying the price." Mother and son erupted into a screaming match that made every customer and bank teller stop and stare. I stood there in silence, taking a sip from my iced coffee, completely unfazed. The sacred mother-son bond they had used as a shield had completely disintegrated under the pressure of money. They were tearing each other apart, like wounded animals. A chime sounded on my iPhone. A push notification from my banking app alerted me that my available balance had increased by $360,000. An enormous figure, the fruit of 10 years of my labor, plus the damages for what they put me through. I logged in and verified the funds were fully cleared. I signed the legal release, confirming the judgment was satisfied. Aaron officially filed the release of judgment, with the court lifting the lis pendens. The condo was technically back under Liam and Brenda's control, but I knew their joy over keeping the house would be fleeting. With that predatory hard money loan and its crippling, compounding interest rates, their nightmare had only just begun. Every morning they woke up, they would have to face a ballooning debt and the pressure of real-life loan sharks. I stood up, smoothed out my blazer, and smiled as I thanked Aaron. I didn't look at Liam or his mother once. I walked out of the bank, leaving their screaming and blaming behind the heavy glass doors. I had taken back what was mine. My life from this moment on turned to a new, clean, and brilliantly bright page. 1 year after the trial, Chicago was gearing up for Christmas. The air was freezing, but the days were sunny and golden. I was sitting in a high-rise restaurant downtown, looking out over the snow-dusted skyline. The scenery was as beautiful as ever, but my state of mind was completely different, calm and utterly free. Today, I had invited my parents and Aaron's family to celebrate the closing of my new home. Yes, I bought another place. But this time it wasn't a massive, 3-bedroom penthouse burdened with pressure and expectations. I bought a cozy, gorgeous industrial loft in the West Loop, walking distance from Chicago's best restaurants and my office. The deed was in my name, and my name only, Chloe Davis. No co-signers, no sharing with anyone. From the money I won in the settlement after returning the $50,000 to my parents, they tried to refuse, so I secretly wired it into an investment account in my dad's name. I used a portion for a heavy down payment on this loft. The rest I invested in index funds and a small side hustle business. My parents had driven up from Indiana. Seeing the loft smaller but infinitely warmer, decorated exactly to my taste, they were overjoyed. My mom smiled and said, "It doesn't matter if the house is a mansion or a studio. What matters is that it's yours, that you are the boss here. That way you eat well and sleep soundly, sweetheart." Aaron raised her glass of Pinot Noir and toasted to me, the new homeowner. After the storm comes the calm. Look at you now. You're glowing. We all clinked glasses. The laughter blended with the soft jazz playing in the background. I felt entirely, profoundly happy. I had learned to love myself, to value my worth, and to understand that for a modern woman to be truly happy, she must be fiercely independent and autonomous. In the middle of dinner, a Facebook notification popped up. A mutual college friend had sent me an update about Liam. I opened it out of morbid curiosity. In the photo attached, Liam looked emaciated and exhausted, wearing an apron, bussing tables at a cheap suburban diner. According to the grapevine, after taking out that loan shark money to pay me off, they couldn't keep up with the predatory monthly interest payments. They were forced to fire sale the luxury penthouse at a massive loss just to keep the loan sharks from breaking their legs. After the sale and paying off the debts, they were left with absolutely zero. Brenda, overcome with the grief of losing it all, fell severely ill and had to move back to Indiana, where she was living in a dilapidated trailer, relying on the charity of resentful relatives. Liam had hastily married a girl from his hometown that his mother pushed on him, but because they were dead broke, they fought constantly. Now he was commuting back to the Chicago suburbs to work as a waiter just to survive, pay for his mother's medical bills, and bear the crushing weight of living paycheck to paycheck. I looked at the photo without feeling hate, nor did I take vicious joy in his misery. I only felt a fleeting sense of pity. Karma in this life works fast, and it is ruthless. They had it all: a beautiful penthouse, a promising future, a loyal, high-earning daughter-in-law. But their own greed and petty, malicious calculations stripped it all away, sinking them into the abyss. I locked my phone and put it face down on the table. My dad was placing a warm slice of prime rib onto my plate. My mom was telling a story about the local winter festival back in Indiana. Erin was joking around with her husband. These cherished faces, these sincere smiles, this was my true treasure. The most valuable asset of all. Outside, the Chicago sun sparkled off the frost on the skyscrapers. The vibrant heartbeat of the city continued on. I took a deep breath of the crisp air, smiling. The storm had passed, leaving me with a clear, boundless blue sky. I knew that a brilliant future awaited me, and I, Chloe Davis, was finally ready to live my most splendid life.